Voice over IP provider node. This chapter provides a comprehensive guide to the voice over IP provider node used in this configuration example. It contains the following and assisted configuration steps. 1. Voice over IP provider PSTN preset. We explore the setup process for connecting with voice over IP providers or public switch telephone network services. This includes configuring the necessary parameters and settings to establish communication with external networks of a voice over IP carrier. 2. Network controller. We discusses the network controller selection and its configuration. This component ensures the communication between the voice over IP provider node and the network infrastructure, managing connectivity and routing. 3. Ports. Here the configuration of ports within the voice over IP provider node, including the setup of port numbers and protocols for inbound and outbound communication. 4. NAT Traversal. We examine the NAT Traversal dialog, which can be important for SIP communication between voice over IP devices behind network address translation, NAT. 5. SIP Interconnection. We show the SIP interconnection dialog, which allows determining one of the two common options, node interconnection via SIP trunking and node as SIP registration client. 6. Remote SIP domain. We explore the setup of remote SIP domains, enabling communication with the external SIP provider domain outside the local network. 7. Client authentication. We show the configuration dialog of the client authentication if it is needed on the requirements of the SIP provider. 8. SIP proxy. We show the SIP proxy assistant dialog, which may act as an intermediary for SIP signaling, e.g., for load balancing or failover scenarios. 9. Asserted URI. We discuss the configuration of Asserted URI, which specifies the identity of the calling or a called party, ensuring accurate routing and identification. 10. Network peer whitelist. We examine the configuration of network peer whitelists, allowing for the definition of trusted IP addresses or ranges for secure communication. 11. Incoming rewrite rules. We explore the setup of rewrite rules for incoming calls, enabling customization and rewriting of call attributes, such as dial strings or caller IDs. 12. Outgoing rewrite rules. We explore the rewrite rules for outgoing calls, enabling customization and rewriting of call attributes, such as dial strings or caller IDs. 13. Node name. We cover the configuration of the node name, which serves as a unique identifier for the voice over IP provider node within the network. 14. Node overview. The provided node configurations will be reviewed in the final assistant dialog. Voice over IP provider preset. The Node Interconnection Assistant in anynode's frontend offers a wide range of pre-configured provider presets, such as the remote SIP domain, voice over IP and protocol-related settings, media codecs, and more. You can select Other Voice over IP Provider if your SIP provider is not listed. However, keep in mind that this approach may require additional configuration steps. Other presets are optimized and may offer fewer configuration dialogues. After selecting your desired profile, click Next to proceed. Network controller. In this configuration dialog, you can limit a node's operation to a specific network controller, including a designated network interface and/or IP address for both SIP and media transport. As no settings or node relationships are initially set, Create New Network Controller needs to be selected with one of the given network options. Once selected, the appropriate network interface configurations must be done. If required, specify the IP version and whether reverse DNS lookup should be enabled. For enhanced network controller settings, the Advanced Configuration option can be used. The option Use a fixed IP address can be used if your network configuration is static and is not expected to change. Any node will unconditionally utilize the configured IP address in that case. However, in this example, the commonly preferred option use an interface's address is used with IP version 4 and disabled reverse DNS lookup. The settings can be reviewed or changed later in the network controller object of the corresponding node. After your configurations, click Next to proceed. Ports. Ensure that the local port values conform to the network and remote configurations. The dynamic UDP/TCP port ranges must be at least 3 times higher than the maximum concurrent sessions. Note, if multiple nodes and network controllers in any node share the same local Ethernet interface and IP address in the operating system, it is mandatory to use unique port ranges to avoid any port collisions. The SIP provider node ports in this example are used with the SIP signaling ports 5063 UDP/TCP and 5064 TLS. Such settings can be reviewed or changed later in the network controller object of the corresponding node. However, the wizard will detect if ports are currently in use and increment accordingly. Please be aware that the wizard only checks the 2 signaling ports and not the dynamic ports. However, when using the defaults or up-on changes on demand, you can proceed with Next. NAT Traversal. If you need NAT Traversal, turn on the Activate NAT Traversal option and enter the IP or host address of the NAT gateway. To define the port mappings, select the In the NAT device, firewall router, a fixed port mapping is defined option and enter the necessary ports and dynamic port ranges. If configured, the reference to the NAT traversal is located in the SIP transport object of the corresponding node and its network settings. Anyway, as no NAT traversal is required in this configuration example, this dialog will be skipped with Next. SIP Interconnection. In this configuration, the node interconnection via SIP trunking type is used as no SIP authentication is needed for the generic SIP provider peering. If selecting the option node as SIP registration client, an additional SIP registration assistant task will be enabled where the registrar URI and the address of record for the client-side registration of this node can be determined. Once the SIP interconnection type is selected, proceed with Next. Remote SIP domain. The remote SIP domain determines where any node sends SIP requests and how it generates SIP or SIP's URIs. This parameter mainly controls the values of the host parts of the header field and the request URI of outgoing SIP messages. To determine the remote SIP domain, select Use URI representation and enter the required SIP domain or IP address of the SIP provider. If not entered, the wizard automatically inserts a SIP prefix in front of the URI after a direct input. The remote SIP domain is located in the SIP node object of the corresponding node and its settings. If everything is set, continue with Next. Client Authentication. The client authentication dialog and its settings determine the remote service's authentication credentials like SIP username and password. As no client authentication is required for the peering with this generic SIP provider node, the option Activate Client Authentication will be unchecked. Once again, we proceed the configurations with the Next button. Proxy. In this assistant dialog, a proxy server can be set. In some cases, you may need to use the proxy server URI to specify a different SIP entity, such as the address of a load balancer, especially when multiple proxy servers are used for redundancy and scalability. This allows any node to distribute traffic across the configured proxy servers. As no proxy server is used for our particular sample configuration, this assistant dialog will be skipped with the Next button. Asserted URI. An asserted URI identifies and routes calls based on the caller's asserted identity. It ensures proper call handling and facilitating authentication and authorization processes. The user part of the asserted URI must comply with SIP provider requirements. It's often required in the P-asserted identity or P-preferred identity SIP header. If a value is entered for the user part, here a valid E.164 main number of the corresponding number range. The complete asserted URI will be automatically updated and displayed in this dialog. Network peer whitelist. The network peer whitelist acts as a security measure by allowing only trusted IP addresses, SIP domains, or network ranges to establish connections with the system. It helps protect against unauthorized access and enhance the overall security of the communication environment. The network peer whitelist options are by default enabled for: include remote SIP domain, include proxy, allow only negotiated peers for RTP/RTCP. The assistant automatically identifies the host names and IP addresses based on previous configurations, which can be modified or added if necessary. Despite the absence of a SIP proxy, the option should remain active. If everything is set, verify that everything is reachable through the IP network. Unless secured by another firewall or router, the whitelist should never be disabled for security reasons. You can continue with next. Incoming rewrite rules. It is recommended to convert incoming calling numbers into the E.164 number space. Various rewrite rule options are available to achieve this. If the node's remote endpoint has its own number space, add one or more rewriting rules and describe the type of conversion. For example, to normalize to E.164 with a plus prefix if any international or national numbers starting with the prefix 00, 0, or 9 are delivered. However, as no incoming rules are needed in this setup, this assistant dialog can be skipped with next. Outgoing rewrite rules. Outgoing rewrite rules can be used if it is necessary to reconvert a calling number from the E.164 number space to another destination number space. If required, add rewriting rules and describe the type of conversion. As for the incoming rewrite rules, no outgoing rules are needed, and this assistant dialog can be skipped with next. Node name. In this assistant dialog, you can change the default node name provided as per your requirement. Please ensure that you always use a unique identifier for the node name. This is important because the node name is also used for routing domain entries and node objects. Once you have made all the necessary changes, you can proceed with the Finish button. Node Overview. Back in the main assistant dialog of the selected scenario, you now get an overview of the completed SIP provider configuration. Check the provided configuration for correctness, and click Next to continue with the Voice over IP System node configurations for Cisco Webex Calling.